We'll go to the college football side of things. Barrett Sallee, welcome into the game. Now, you've got your bracket ready, right? You've got your projections for Alabama basketball?
I do not. I do know that they are very up and down, and I did watch the game Saturday against Tennessee, and my goodness, that was an annihilation.
Yeah, they run them out of the gym, but they play up to the competition, down to the competition. I guess that's what you expect from. But we're just excited to even think about possibility of going dancing. We had a pretty much no pulse for about 2 or 3 years, and now we've got a pulse, and it's
it's crazy to see. I mean, I saw I guess it was one of those bracket or basketball power index things that ESPN does. Like Auburn and Tennessee have a 99.9% chance of making the tournament. Texas A&M has like a 99.6. Alabama's up there ahead of Kentucky as well. It's like, what world is this? Like, how is this happening in the SEC? It's interesting.
No, it is. And certainly we'll talk a little football here with you. We'll go back to the football side of things. Alabama reportedly has an interest in Gardner Minshew, a quarterback that would walk into being a backup quarterback at Alabama. From a starter to a backup. Can you wrap your head around this for a little bit? I mean, we're talking about a starter, and I know he's got family issues, wants to be closer to home.
Sure.
But why would Alabama want a grad transfer quarterback?
Because they know that one of their guys is transferring, or at least think that way. And I think we all think that way. I mean, we all were, I think, not floored, but really impressed with the way that Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa handled themselves after the national championship game. But, a given time, one of them is going to win the job, and the other's probably going to transfer. So they'd rather not have Mac Jones as their primary backup. So they need somebody to be that guy. Now, Gardner Minshew's a good quarterback. Is he, going to win an SEC championship for Alabama? Probably not. But he's at least going to keep them in football games if he goes there. So I think they have to explore their options. But I'm also a firm believer, and I've told you this for years, I think Alabama's in the preventative transfer market. That's why they were interested in some way, shape, or form with Braxton Miller and Everett Golson. I think that's part of why they got Jacob Coker. Obviously, that worked out for them. Garrett Dieter, you name it. Like I think part of Alabama's approach this time of year is we kind of want your guys, but we want to make sure nobody else has guys that can come back and beat us. So I think that's a little bit at play here too.
Yeah, but it does go back. And I think you said it and everybody else is we're kind of dancing around a little bit because it's like if you say it, you automatically get judged one way or the other, fair or not fair. It's like, hey, listen, Tua gives you something. I don't know it. I've said we're going to see a different Jalen Hurts in the spring. I don't know what that's really going to be. I think we're going to see a Jalen Hurts that's going to press a little bit. He's going to take chances where he was not willing to take chances during the 2017 season.
Well, and that may or may not work out for him. Well, because it's the thing with Jalen is this. I mean, you and I have talked about this for 2 years now. They were very, very careful with him for 2 years with the offense. They knew what he was capable of. They didn't ask him to do anything more. And I think part of that was because it worked. I mean, his first loss was in the national championship game. Why would you change anything up to that point? His second was in the Iron Bowl in a winner-take-all game for the division title. Why would you change anything up to that point? You shouldn't. So, now he needs to change, obviously. They need to change what they ask of him to do, and it may work. It may not work. And if it doesn't work, he's still good enough to go play somewhere because look at what his resume has already proven. He can take a team, a primarily multidimensional running team, and win at an extremely high level. Now, he's not going to have the weapons around him if he transfers that he has at Alabama. I get that, but he can still play somewhere, and he knows that. I think everybody knows that.
But let me ask you this. Does it give you the flexibility if you've got a true backup quarterback that you know is going to be here and maybe he wants to put jewelry in his finger or whatever the reason is that he'd want to be in Tuscaloosa, does it give you the flexibility to ask Jalen, do you want to cross-train? Because we don't think that you could play next level NFL football at the QB position. Would you consider looking at another position?
Yeah, it does, because then you can actually legitimately train him at that position instead of worrying about him getting hurt because you may need him as a quarterback at some point. So, that gives you flexibility. Sure, there's no doubt about that. That was essentially, if you remember, that's what sold Braxton Miller on staying at Ohio State.
Right.
Was the idea of, hey, look, I'm going to be a wide receiver, so I'm going to go play wide receiver. And so that they obviously had a little bit more stable of a quarterback situation with Cardale and J.T. Barrett at the time. You can sell it that way for sure. And I think for a lot of these guys that Alabama considers or get, whether it be at the quarterback position or somewhere else as grad transfers, they realize that, being a backup at Alabama or being a role player at Bama, like take Gary Dieter, for instance. Did playing at Bama make him a better player? Yeah. Did he have a better season than he had at Bowling Green? No, of course he didn't. But it helped him train for a future. He thought it was the best avenue for him to get ready for his future. It helped the team, and it obviously was, he wanted to go get a ring on his finger. So all those things are factoring in for all these guys that are considering Alabama for sure.
Barrett, how much of a risk is it for Alabama on the defensive side of the football that they will have all new faces now except Tosh Lapoy, which has never called plays before in collegiate football, will now be your play caller on that side of the football. Has never really coached the back end of the secondary either to set that stage up.
Yeah, it's concerning. There is no doubt. And I've talked to people in coaching circles who have basically said, Alabama's not going to be able to withstand the kind of coaching turnover like it has in years past this time around. I think the one mitigating factor is the fact that I think the SEC West is going to be far more winnable this year than it was last year and other years. So they may not have to be as it may not have to be as fluid as a transition maybe as it has in years past. So it's a legitimate concern for sure. I think Nick Saban knows it. I think that's a big reason why Tosh Lupoy was given the defensive coordinator role, because they understand that above all else, Nick Saban can also jump back in and throw his hands in the cookie jar wherever he feels it's needed and wherever it appears. So it's a concern, yes. Is it anything that's going to prevent Alabama from winning the West next year? No, I think far more bigger issues are injuries and depth problems to keep position.
Do you think it would be fair to put more pressure now that, we've said this for about a year now, but I mean, this is now true that the offensive side of the football is going to have to carry this team?
Yeah, it might. I think a step back defensively by Alabama standards, which is different than other standards, I get that, is to be expected. So, yeah, I mean, if you put next year's defense, even though they're going to be loaded with talent, on an offense that was led by Jalen Hurts the last two seasons, I don't think that blend is going to work very well. You're going to have to be more explosive. You're going to have to win games that are a little bit higher scoring, and you're going to have to potentially dig out of some holes that are a little bit more, they're a little deeper, a little more daunting. So, yeah, that's fair, but I also think Alabama is fully capable of doing that offensively. We all saw what the offense is capable of in the national title game with a bunch of young kids, and a lot of those guys are returning. So, I think that's a pretty fair way to look at what Alabama is, and that's, I think, more proof, and I've said this for years, defense doesn't win championships anymore. Just enough defense wins championships, and that's a moving target based on landscape of game, scheme of team you're playing, scheme of team you are offensively, all of those things.
Let me go to Georgia here for a couple of minutes. How much do they lose from last year's, obviously, SEC champion team and national championship appearance? How much do they lose, and how much is that depth behind them that can get them back in the college football playoff conversation?
I don't think they're going to lose that much at all. I think you look at the numbers, and it's something like 20 or 30 seniors or whatever, or juniors that declared early. But really only 8 or 9 of those guys were impactful, really important players. Their names you know about, obviously, Chubb, Michelle, all those guys, Roquan Smith. But at running back, I think they'll be fine. I think from a secondary standpoint, they've got a lot of depth there the last couple of years, although getting D'Angelo Gibbs, back and his head screwed on straight would certainly help. I think the biggest issue is really linebacker because, Bellamy, Carter, Roquan Smith, they've got players they like. They've got players they trust. They've got players with a ton of talent stepping in, including a few that they signed in this class, Reese and Quay Walker among them. But those guys played together for so long and played together so well. That, I think, is the one spot where you have a little bit of concern. But again, sort of like Alabama, how much of a difference is that going to make? How much of a, even if they do take a pretty big step back there, in that division with that schedule, is it going to be a game changer or a difference maker? I don't know. Maybe not.
We're talking to Barrett Sallee right now as we continue our conversation. CBSSports.com, National College Football Analyst. Let me go to Baton Rouge here for a couple of minutes. Is Coach O on the hottest seat in the SEC?
Yes, without a doubt. I think he put himself in that situation by basically pulling a 180 on Joe Oliva and going against the philosophy that he sold the administration on when he got the job on a full-time basis, when he went and got rid of Matt Canada for Steve Ensminger. So that's on Ed Orgeron. It's a make-or-break year for him. It's, I think, a defining year for that program. And that's why I said, hey, look, they're going to be a contender in the SEC West in 2 or 3 years, because in 2 or 3 years, it's either going to be working at an extremely high level with Coach Orgeron, or some other coach is going to have an ultra-talented team that he can take over and win at an extremely high level with. So, I think this is it for Ed Orgeron, because if it doesn't work, everybody's getting cleaned out, including Joe Oliva. If it does work, he's going to be the most beloved coach in LSU history, and he'll have a loaded roster to continue working with.
And when we say work, what are we talking about? Second place in the SEC West?
Well, it depends. Second place in the SEC West, I think, for Ed Orgeron and LSU depends on what second place looks like. If it's what Alabama was this year, then he's fine. But if it's one of those years where it's Alabama and everybody else in the West, and that he's going to have some issues.
Barrett Sallee, as he regrades the SEC coaching hires post-National Signing Day, Florida A+. Dan Mullen already getting a few jabs in there, Kirby Smart. How do you like that?
I love it. Dan Mullen is definitely pro-trash talk, which I'm always for, especially this time of year when there's not a whole lot going on. So, I think he feels like that program should be back. He's the right man for the job, and that program has traditionally owned Georgia. And so I'm 100% for that. But we need more of that. We need less coach speak.
Tennessee A, Mississippi State A-, Texas A&M B. Why Jimbo Fisher not an A? Why did he not get an A?
I think he's extremely stubborn. And while I like the staff that he's put together, and I like the recruiting close, I still think that he's going to meddle too much and try to overcomplicate things for Texas high school football players who grow up playing offensive football and essentially what amounts to 7-on-7. And while the hires, especially Daryl Dickey, sort of suggest that he's going to move into more Texas-style offensive football, I get a feeling his stubbornness might take over, and he might go run, huck it deep, which is exactly what cost them the 2017 season.
Chad Morris, a C at Arkansas.
Recruiting class is just sort of which is not going to fly if you're counting on a staff to coach up average players in the SEC West at Arkansas. That's not going to work. Didn't work for Brett Bielema. Not going to work for Chad Morris. Don't like the staff. The John Chavis hire doesn't make sense to me at all. So I like Chad Morris as a coach. I thought they were making the right decision with Chad Morris, but really ever since then, I don't like it at all.
Well, as you said, it doesn't really have a lot of flash in it. I mean, it didn't give you you're just kind of like just equal on the pulse level. It's just, it doesn't give you up or down. You like him, but it's not like one of these overexciting jobs, and some of these other guys are making much, much bigger splashes.
Yeah, I mean, if he'd have hired an all-star staff and still recruited at a decent level, maybe. Okay, I'd have bought in a little more, but I don't like the staff. And last night, I didn't look today. I didn't know they got a junior college kid on Friday, but they're out there with Vanderbilt and Kentucky in the SEC in recruiting. That's not going to fly.
Woo! Wow. especially not in the SEC West. Barrett Sallee, you'll find him on CBSSports.com, radio on ESPNU on SiriusXM, SEC Smothered and Covered. Go subscribe to the great podcast there, SEC Smothered and Covered. A great way to connect with Barrett is on the Twitter account, @Barrett Sallee. Barrett, as always, thank you again for your time. I'll talk to you next Monday.
All right, thanks for having me.